But if there's one thing that my research convinces me of, is that the people who need guns the most are the ones who are most likely victims. And the people who are the most likely victims of violent crime in our country are poor blacks who live in high crime urban areas. To me, putting these taxes on the people who can least afford to pay them is you're denying them, the people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime, the ability to go and defend themselves. From that tax, how can you justify saying that the people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime, you know, Democrats who talk about poor people, the problems that they have generally not paying tax, for some reason we're completely unsympathetic to poor victims being exempt from these taxes. I look at that, and the only thing I can think of that could justify having that type of tax is that they want to reduce gun ownership, and they particularly want to reduce gun ownership among poor people, particularly among poor blacks who are most likely to be victims of these violent crimes. Look, you know, you can look at Massachusetts, for example. Massachusetts had gun registry and licensing that went into effect in 1998. At that time, you had about 1.5 million people registered to own guns in Massachusetts, legally registered to own guns. Today, it's just a little bit over 200,000. In 13 years, the registration and licensing rules that they had in Massachusetts were able to go and reduce gun ownership in Massachusetts by 86%. Now, you may not have been following this closely, but Massachusetts' murder rate relative to states like yours here has changed a lot in those 13 years. In 1998, Massachusetts' murder rate was 30% below the average of its neighbors. Today, Massachusetts' murder rate is 30% above the average murder rate for its neighbors. That change started right when the registration and licensing laws started making it difficult for law-abiding citizens to own the guns. And again, who do you think were the people that were most likely to have their guns taken away? It was poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas. You go and look at New York City. You have a few thousand people who have concealed handgun permits. Who do they allow to have them? It's basically wealthy whites. You go and look at parts of New York City, like Harlem and other places, the number of blacks who are allowed to go through the process to get guns when you have discretion on the part of these Democrats that control the city governments in those places is virtually zero. The people that they claim to care about are the very law-abiding good citizens who they disarm in these cases. Now, I have to talk about the tragedy that was suffered here in Newtown. You know, the federal law that's been talked about, people, you know, it's pretty obvious to most of us that it wouldn't have had any effect on that tragedy. But, you know, one of the things that needs to be talked about is what motivates these killers and where they commit these crimes time after time. I kind of wish the state would release its report on the Newtown thing now before you had voted on these new laws, rather than voting on these laws before they knew everything about this. But there are a few facts that have come out. One is that Adam Lanza apparently had been planning this attack for over 2 years before he engaged in it. Another fact is that this guy apparently put together a massive spreadsheet, something like 4 feet by 7 feet, where he had gone and recorded past mass victim shootings that had occurred. And one of the things he related this to was the amount of media coverage that they got. He apparently proved to himself something that I think is pretty obvious to most people, and that is the attacks where more people are killed or injured, get more media attention. And one other fact that seems to have come out is that he compared himself to the Norway killer, who holds the record about less than 2 years ago for killing an individual, killing the most people with a gun, killing 69 people and wounding 110 others. One thing that you see, if you read the diaries, if you look at the videotapes, if you look at other things that these killers leave after they go and commit these crimes, is that they wanted to commit suicide, but they wanted to commit suicide in a way that would make it so that people would know that they were here. They want people's attention. And so they choose places to attack where they think they can be more successful in killing more people. Who knows what the investigation will show in terms of more details that are there. But my guess is what happened is he picked the school because he knew people weren't going to be able to defend themselves, and because the emotional reaction of the children being killed. He picked a vulnerable place precisely for its newsworthiness, so that just as he went and looked at those other cases, he realized that if he did that, he would get more media attention. Now, I'm not going and saying we should pass laws to go and ban the media from going and talking about these attacks, but it's still useful for people to keep in the back of their minds what's motivating these people in the crimes that they're committing here. One common feature, not just at Newtown, but in virtually all the other mass shootings that we've had here in the United States, is that time after time, they keep on occurring where guns are banned. I don't know if you know this, but up until the end of '95, people who had concealed handguns in Connecticut would have been allowed to carry them at the school. With just 2 exceptions, all the multiple victim public shootings in the United States since at least 1950 have taken place where guns are banned. I'll just give you a couple stories to illustrate this. Look at the Colorado shooting this last summer. There were 7 movie theaters showing the premiere of the Batman movie within a 20-minute drive of the killer's apartment. Only one of those movie theaters posted signs banning permanently concealed handguns. The killer didn't go to the movie theater that was closest to his home. He didn't go to the movie theater that was second closest to his home. He didn't go to the movie theater that advertised itself prominently as having the largest auditoriums in the state of Colorado. You would think if somebody wanted to go and kill lots of people, go to a premiere night for a movie at the largest auditoriums in the state. Instead, the killer went to the single movie theater that banned victims from being able to go and defend themselves. Look at the mall shooting in Omaha, or in Kansas City, or the mall shooting in Salt Lake City that we've had over the years. You can have 6, 7, 8 enclosed malls in those different cities. In 2 of those cities, only 1 mall posted gun-free zone signs, and another one, 2 posted it. Where did the killers go? Just as they go time after time, they pick the venue where the victims weren't able to defend themselves. They picked the venue that had posted signs banning people to have guns for protection. You know, we've heard a lot today about freedom. If I have some advice, you have to think about what matters to people in the middle of the debate. You can't go and use rhetoric that primarily appeals to what you might think is important. To the vast majority of people in the middle of this debate, safety is the ultimate keyword that's there. You have a strong argument. In this case, freedom and safety go together. But if somebody goes and says, I don't think people should be able to sell guns because it's my Second Amendment right, you're not going to win the debate. You have to go and use something that fits in here and explain, as I did previously, how some of these rules work against safety in this case. You have to go and explain to them why what may seem like the obvious solution in these cases, like gun registration, how that can actually hurt people's safety by taking police away from the valuable things and time that we know that they can accomplish if we give them the right tools and let them do traditional types of policing policy that we know works. As I say, police are the single most important factor for reducing crime, but police themselves understand that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crime's been committed. There was a massive poll just done by Police One, which has about 400,000 police in the United States as members. They surveyed 16,000 people, and 79% of the police officers that were surveyed said that law-abiding citizens having guns was either extremely or very important in reducing crime. Police, particularly street officers, agree with you on this type of stuff. They agree with you that you are ultimately the first line of defense. Even though they know they're important in deterring crime, they know that they're not going to be there to help you. And they know how valuable guns are to themselves, and they're sympathetic. The vast majority of police officers are sympathetic to having you be able to go and defend yourself. But when police can't be there, my research convinces me of two groups of people who benefit the most from having the option to protect themselves. It's people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. The presence of a gun represents a much bigger change in a woman's ability to go and resist an attack from what's virtually always a male attacker than it does for a male victim. Both benefit, but the benefit is much larger for women. And the second group of people, as I've already mentioned, are the people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime. And that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas. It'd be great if the police were able to protect them all the time, but they're not. And that raises the question of what people should do when they're having to confront criminals by themselves. But when you argue with people, point out it's the most vulnerable people in our society who benefit the most from having the option to be able to go and protect themselves. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr.